Hi guys, as you know, we're beginning the new unit for science this term, which is biology. During this unit, we'll look at the two topics of genetics and evolution, starting with genetics. So let's get started. Getting into genes. Can you roll your tongue? Did you know that your genes determine whether you can? Do you fit into your genes or do they really fit into you? The characteristics of living things are determined by both the genetic information that they contain and the environment in which they live. New technologies have harnessed genetic machinery in order to change or create new organisms. What are the implications of manipulating raw material of life? What is heredity? Why do children look like their parents? Why do brothers and sisters resemble each other? The answer is this is because we inherit traits from our parents. The passing of traits from parents to child is the basis of heredity. So, where exactly are our traits? I'd like you to copy the notes from this slide into your notebook. Our genes encode the instructions that define our traits. Each of us have thousands of genes which are made up of DNA which reside inside of our chromosomes. The environment we grow up and live in also helps define our traits. For example, while a person's genes may specify a certain hair colour, exposure to chemicals or sunlight can change that hair colour. If you look at this diagram here, you can see the breakdown of what this is explaining. So within our cell, the cell contains the nucleus. Inside of the nucleus is where you will find the chromosomes. These chromosomes then contain each of the individual genes, which located inside of these genes is the DNA that codes for our traits. I would like you to also copy down the notes from this slide into your notebook. Every child receives half of its traits from its mother and half of its traits from its father. This takes place at conception when both the egg cell joins with the sperm cell. Each cell contains 46 sets of chromosomes. Each egg cell and sperm cell only contain 23 sets of chromosomes. The egg and sperm cell will then fuse to form the zygote, which contains the total 46 sets of chromosomes. Each parent contributes one complete set of chromosomes to the child. This set can contain chromosomes from both of the parents' two sets. The only rule is that the child must receive exactly one of each chromosome. The father's chromosomes can be represented by these two sets here, a green set and a red set. At the end of the sets of the chromosomes, you can see that there is the letters. These letters represent the sex chromosomes that determine the gender of the human. In this case, because the father is male, he contains one X and one Y. It is the Y chromosome that determines that he is a male. The mother's chromosomes are represented by the blue and the yellow set of chromosomes. Her sex chromosomes indicate two X chromosomes, therefore she is a female. Looking down here at the first baby's possible chromosomes, the top row represents the chromosomes that were given by the father, which in total would equal to 23, including the sex chromosome, and the mother's totaling to 23, including the sex chromosomes. From the father, the baby has received 1 and 2 from his green set, 3 from his red set, and so on. Looking at the sex chromosome, the father has given this child an X chromosome. Looking at the mother's contribution, you can see that the mother has given the child 1 and 2 from her yellow set, 3, 4, 5 in blue from her blue set. Looking finally here at the 23rd chromosome, you can see that the sex chromosome that the mother gave is an X, as this is the only option that she can give the child. Looking at these two chromosomes, you can then determine the sex of the child. So the sex of this child is that she is a female. Each genetic instruction that codes for a particular trait, for example, the shape of your earlobe, the blood group that you have, or your eye color, is called a gene. A gene is responsible for containing the coding information that will determine what the shape of your earlobe is, the blood group that you are, or the eye color that you express. Genes are made up of DNA and are organized into larger structures called chromosomes, as we previously explained, which are located within the nucleus of the cell. The diagram here illustrates what this looks like. So the DNA is contained here in the double helix, which is coiled. The coiling allows it to be able to fold upon itself and contain a large amount of information being stored in the chromosome. These chromosomes are then stored within the nucleus within a cell. Please copy these notes into your notebook as well. You can now pause the PowerPoint slideshow to complete the questions, but before you do, you need to look here at the family tree. The family tree is made up of two different families, the Davis family and the Swift family. The Davis family's parents are represented by Ken and Margaret. The Swift family is represented by Kevin and Gwenda. You can then see that each Ken and Margaret had 4 children. Kevin and Gwenda had 4 children. Of these children, Jeff and Linda married to then go on and have 4 children each. When looking at the family tree, we are looking at the expression of eye color. Question 1 is asking you to record any patterns that you may notice through each of the generations represented in the family tree. Question 2 is asking if the following couples had another child, suggest what their eye color may be and give a reason for your suggestion. Looking at these 3 couples. Question 3 would like you to suggest a reason why Jeff, with brown eyes, and Linda, with blue eyes, had brown-eyed and blue-eyed children, whereas Ken, with brown eyes, and Margaret, with blue eyes, only had brown-eyed children. So you are looking here at the combination of blue and brown eyes versus brown eyes. Martin Swift's fiancée, Justine, here's Martin, has blue eyes, but both of her parents have brown eyes. If Justine and Martin have children together, what eye color do you think may be possible, and discuss your reasons for your response. Pause now to complete the questions. If we look a little bit closer at the patterns of inheritance when it comes to eye color, we can look at this diagram here to show us an explanation. Look, the first column represents parent A and the second column represents parent B. This section here shows us the odds of the eye color of the baby. If both parents have brown eyes, you would expect that the baby would have a higher percentage chance of receiving brown eyes, then green eyes, and then blue eyes. This has to do with the dominance of the genes, which we'll discuss at a later point. Looking down here, you can also see further combinations and the outcomes or percentage chance of the babies from these 2 parents receiving the particular eye color. If we look at the green and a brown parent, you can see that it provides a 50% chance of brown, 37.5% chance of green, and 12.5% chance of blue. Looking down the bottom here, you can see that if both parents receive blue eyes, the chances of the children receiving brown eyes is 0%, green is 1%, and a 99% chance of receiving blue. This also comes down to the dominance and recessiveness of the genes, which we will discuss further at a later date. Consider the family tree diagram that was used in the previous questions to answer these questions also. You might like to pause at the end to reflect back to help you answer the questions. Read and think about each of the following statements and then state whether you agree, disagree, or don't know. Discuss your decision with your team. Because June and Frank have 5 sons, the chance of their next child being a daughter is increased. Do you agree, disagree, or you don't know? Think about how the inheritance of genes may be passed from one generation to the next. People who have committed very violent crimes should be sterilized because their children will also be violent. Parents should be allowed to access technologies that enable them to select the gender and specific characteristics of their children. And finally, technologies that alter the gametes, which is sperm and egg, or otherwise known as ova, should be illegal. Pause and answer these questions. I'd like you to copy these notes into your notebook also. Sex cells. Another type of cell division called meiosis is used to produce sex cells or gametes, which are known as ovum in singular form, which is the egg, and sperm. The genetic information that you received from your mother and was packaged into 23 chromosomes in the nucleus of her egg cell. And the genetic information that you received from your father was packaged into 23 chromosomes in the nucleus of the sperm that fertilized the mother's egg cell. When these gametes fused together at fertilization, the resulting zygote contained 23 pairs of chromosomes, one pair from each parent, so that you received a total of 46 chromosomes. Looking at these diagrams, you can see that chromosomes are made up of autosomes and sex chromosomes. The sex chromosomes are then broken into our X chromosome and our Y chromosome, remembering that before 2 X chromosomes determines that the sex of the individual will be female, and an X and a Y chromosome will determine that the sex of an individual is a male. Looking here, you can then see the breakdown of the sex cells. The sex cells can give us our ovum or egg, which contains 23 chromosomes, our sperm, which contains 23 chromosomes, and when these two combine to form the zygote, we have a total of 46 chromosomes. Could you also copy these notes on somatic cells into your notebook? Cells of your body that are not your sex cells are often referred to as somatic cells. Basically, somatic cells are any other cell in your body other than your sperm and egg cells. Remembering that if you're a male, you only contain sperm cells, not egg cells, and that if you're a female, you only contain egg cells, not sperm cells. All of your somatic cells contain chromosomes in pairs within the nucleus. This double set of genetic instructions, which was made up of one set from each parent, makes your genotype. So just to confirm, your genotype is the code that your chromosomes make to express the traits that you see. So it's the code. The genotype is the code of your genes. The visible expression of the genotype as a particular trait or feature is called your phenotype. So what we see is called your phenotype. What these genes code for to express, and what we see is then the phenotype. The phenotype may also be influenced by the environment, as we spoke about before. Your appearance of traits can be changed based on the environment around you. The example given was hair color. So your hair color could be dyed or changed by chemicals to change the way it looks based on what your genotype coded for. Looking down here, this is showing us again the breakdown of our chromosomes, sex cells, and our X chromosomes, and then it's also showing us that our genotype combined with the environment helps to express our phenotype, what we see. Continuing on with some more definitions, I'd like you to also copy these notes down into your notebook. So what is a trait? A trait is a notable feature or quality in a person. Each of us have different combinations of traits that make us unique. Here are a few examples that you can look at and see which of these traits that you have. For example, earlobes. Earlobes can either be attached to the ear, so you'll notice that the ear goes straight across, or you can contain a free earlobe, which here shows more of a break from the side of the face. The next group of traits that you can look at as examples is your hairline. So you can either have a widow's peak, so that your hairline comes to a point, or no widow's peak, shown here by more of a straight curved hairline. The last one displayed here is your chin. Your chin can have a little dimple in the middle here. This is known as a cleft chin, or no dimple, resulting in a no cleft chin. Take a moment to have a look of which of these traits that you contain. The last of the definitions that we're going to copy down into our notebooks today is the type of traits. So traits can be broken up into different types. The first of these different types is physical traits. These are characteristics of one's physical makeup. For example, your eye color, your hair color, and your height. So things that make up your physical appearance. The next is behavioral traits, the way one acts. For example, the retrieval of objects in golden retrievers. So this is something that is in their genetic makeup. That is why it is a behavior that they often display. Of course, behaviours can also be learnt based on the environment that you're in. The last here is the predeposition to a medical condition, so an increased risk of getting a certain type of disease, for example, cystic fibrosis, heart disease, or certain types of mental illness. You may notice that these diseases would be carried by individuals that have been passed down from previous generations in their genes. For example, haemophilia often runs in the royal family. That's why they're referred to as having blue blood, because of the running of the disease haemophilia. To finish our lesson, we're going to look at a few different traits that you can check to see whether or not you possess yourself. So how are traits determined? Here we look at an example of the trait of one's thumb and what it looks like. So try to bend your thumb backwards at a joint. Some people can form at least a 45-degree angle, which is known as the hitchhiker's thumb. Other people have straight thumbs which do not bend in this way. Which one do you have? Look at your thumb to see. The diagram here shows an example. Scientists describe the set of genetic information for each form as an allele, pronounced allele. We can describe the straight thumb allele with a H, a capital H, and the allele for the hitchhiker's thumb with a lowercase h. If we look at these traits together, how are these traits determined? Remembering that you contain two sets of genes, one from your mother and one from your father. These two traits together would determine your genotype for the trait of thumb structure, and then in turn determines the phenotype of what you see. Each of us have two alleles for thumb extension trait. As a result, we all have one of these combinations, either capital H plus capital H resulting in straight thumbs, capital H lowercase h resulting in a straight and a hitchhiker's thumb, or two lowercase h's resulting in two hitchhiker's thumbs. This is a good opportunity for me to explain the difference between dominant and recessive. So a capital H is referred to as the dominant allele. Okay, so a dominant allele is represented by a capital letter, while a recessive allele, which we'll talk about is a little bit in more detail later, is represented by a lowercase h. If we contain two of these dominant alleles together, you can guarantee that the trait that you see will be the dominant trait. If we have one of each, a dominant and a recessive, so a capital letter and a lowercase letter, you generally will express the dominant trait. If you contain two lowercase letters, so the recessive alleles, you will express the recessive trait. Building on from what we just spoke about, you can probably guess the trait in people who have two of the same alleles, so capital H and capital H. Those with these will have straight thumbs. Those with two little h's will have a hitchhiker's thumbs. Scientists use the word homozygous to describe having two of the same allele for that trait. So the capital H and capital H that you see at the top here is a homozygous dominant, because these are the dominant traits. The two lowercase h's here is homozygous recessive. These are the recessive traits. To add on this, the mixture of capital H and lower h is known as heterozygous. So as I mentioned at the end of last slide, this slide showing us what the heterozygous genotype looks like, that it contains the capital H allele, the dominant allele, and then the lowercase h allele as recessive. So it explains here that the dominant allele masks the recessive allele, and that we therefore see a straight thumb. Okay, so we're going to have a look at inherited human traits and do a little check to see what your traits look like and what you have inherited. So the first one is the earlobes that we mentioned before, whether you have attached earlobes or the unattached earlobes. The next is the inherited trait of whether you have the ability to roll your tongue or not. The next one is whether you contain or your cheeks have dimples or not. And when you clasp your hands together, do you put your left thumb on the top or the right thumb on the top? This one here is indicating coloured blindness, so whether or not you're colourblind. So if you look at each of the 4 images, looking at this one first here, if you are not colourblind, you should be able to see the number 6. Here you should be able to see the number 7, the number 5, and then this one's generally debated, but the number 26. Some of you might make it out as though there is a 28. The widow's peak that we spoke about before is this one here.